Hello, carnivore hunters. I'm Doug.
And I'm Rick. If you're thinking about getting into hunting or you're a new hunter, then this video is for you. If you're a seasoned hunter, be sure to stick around with us to the end of this video and share this information with any new hunters you may know because the life you save might be your own. It's been said that hunting is the safest sport in America. However, despite the mandatory hunter safety courses that are required before you can purchase a tag and all the information you can find on the internet and social media and from other experienced hunters, we still sadly hear about accidents and injuries every year.
Yeah, now we're making this video based on some personal experience we've had in the past, which we'll share with you in a moment. But I'm going to read a paragraph for you right now, right out of the Colorado Parks and Wildlife about hunter safety. So, Colorado began offering voluntary hunter education in the 1950s. During the 1960s, Colorado hunters experienced an average of 10 fatal and 24 non-fatal hunting accidents each year. Noting this, the Colorado legislature took action and passed the hunter education course completion requirement in 1970. The effect? In the first 10 years of implementation, fatal hunting accidents were cut in half by the 1990s. The yearly averages were down to 1.3 fatal and 11 non-fatal hunting accidents. This trend has continued into the new millennium, and hunting accidents, both fatal and non-fatal, are at their lowest levels ever. Since hunter education became mandatory in 1970, more than 900,000 students have passed Colorado's hunter education course.
Yeah, so we have this graphic up here to the side, and let's analyze this data for a moment because it, it seems to be slightly misleading at the end here. Uh, I don't want to argue that there hasn't been a huge improvement in safety. The classes have definitely helped, and and the fatal and non-fatal injuries have improved. But I want to get to point something out here because this is super misleading. Um, so from the 1960s on up through 2009, you could see there was a huge improvement. The 90s and the 2000s, there was only a slight improvement, but it's an improvement. These next two lines, however, if you look at them, they're only showing a half a decade, right? So everything above that is a full decade, and then they split the 2010s into two parts. And so we feel like possibly this is purposely done so it would look like the numbers are improving even more when really they're not. Because if you add up 2010 to 2020, the fatal injuries, there's a slight improvement by one. And the non fatal, there actually was quite an improvement there. But you know, when you're being fed data like this, just kind of critically look at it, and um, it's great. There's been a huge improvement overall, but really over the last 2 or 3 decades, there hasn't been a whole lot of improvement. Uh, and so, based on our personal experiences, we kind of have a feeling like we know why, and we're going to share that with you.
Yeah, and we're not trying to take anything away from this from the work that CPW has done. These numbers are over the long term a huge improvement, but we just feel that even one fatality or one injury is just one too many. I'm personally a certified range safety officer, and there's 4 universal rules of firearm safety. Now, depending on where you look them up, they're always gonna read slightly different, but it's gonna come down to the same 4 basic concepts. Number 1 is always keep the muzzle pointed in a safe direction. Number 2 is always treat the firearm as if it were loaded. Number 3, keep your finger off the trigger until your sights are on its intended target. And number 4 is always be sure of your target and what is behind it. Now, I'm of the belief these rules should be memorized by everyone who ever handles a firearm. But in my mind, there is one more. It's one that I know our dad taught us and seemed to be universal when we were growing up. Even if I were to, when I went hunting with a friend when I was younger, before you would go hunting with that friend, you could pretty much guarantee at some point his dad was going to approach you and ask you one question. And that question would always be, "Hey, Doug, what's the first thing you do when you pick up a firearm?" And the only acceptable response is, "You check to see if it's loaded, sir." If you said anything else, you wouldn't go. And back then, dads had no qualms with leaving a kid behind, especially if he was concerned for his own safety or the safety of his kid. So, this is something that was pounded into my head as a child and something that I've taught my children as well. Even if you don't
Yeah.
own firearms and never intend to own firearms, I would still recommend if you have kids, teach them these 5 rules or the 4+1, right? Because you never know what they're going to run into when you can't be there with them. So it just for their own safety, teach them this.
Yeah. And so the state of Colorado actually expands on this a little bit more on their website. And so let's go over this list real quick, and then we'll talk about some of our personal experiences. But number one, as Doug mentioned from his RSO training, keep the muzzle pointed in a safe direction. Number two, this is a Colorado law, so we kind of have to follow this rule in Colorado. If you're not a state hunter, pay attention. Unload the firearm when not in use or traveling in a vehicle. It's required by Colorado law, and trust me, they do stop you and they will check you.
Every year we get
Yep,
stopped by
yep,
a wildlife officer, and even on your ATVs
yep,
in the gun boot on your ATV, that counts. So
yep.
they have to be unloaded.
They'll make you pull your gun out of your scabbard, and actually your gun better be in the scabbard while you're
Yeah.
traveling, because that'll be another huge hit. And they'll have you pull it out of the scabbard, uh, and if you're loaded, you're getting a ticket.
Yep.
Uh, do not rely on the safety. Number three, you could have a faulty safety, and your firearm can still discharge. Number four, you can see this one's in red. This is a huge one. Be sure of your target and what's behind it. Uh, so I'm going to come back to this one in a minute because I've had a couple personal experiences with this. Uh, and then number five, use the correct ammo.
Yeah, as a range safety officer, I can tell you the number one cause of catastrophic failures on the range is hand-loaded ammo. Now, there's nothing wrong with hand-loaded ammo. I have a lot of friends that do it, and even our dad used to do it at a time. But it's something that you have to be very careful with when you do it. There are specific measurements for a reason. And every once in a while, you get a guy on the range who decides to Tim Taylor his hand loads and just pack in as much power as you can. And a lot of times that's gonna end up with a best case scenario, they just destroy their gun. Worst case scenario, they're taking a ride in an ambulance.
Yeah. So yeah, number five and six. For me, I got a story that ties together with these two as well. So five was use the correct ammo. Six, use extra caution if your gun misfires. We'll talk about those in a moment. Be sure your barrel is clear of obstructions. Do not alter or modify your gun, and know the mechanical characteristics of your firearm. This is not an all-inclusive list. This is just a couple different sources we pulled this list from. Um, so let's talk about five and six real quick. Use the correct ammo and use caution if your gun misfires. Years ago, I wasn't making a lot of money back then, and I was trying to be frugal, and I bought a box of hand-loaded rounds from a buddy of mine, 30-06. I was shooting at the time, and so I got to my hunting spot. I opened the truck, and I had my box of shells on the on the seat, and I'm loading the magazine, and then I go to put one in the chamber, and I throw the bolt up, and when I threw the bolt up, the firearm discharged, and because I was standing in my not in my truck, but next to my truck with the door open, that that shot just rang my ears, and for weeks my ears were ringing, and I had a hard time hearing. I thought I was going to be partially deaf for the rest of my life. It eventually passed, fortunately, and it scared me so bad I dropped the rifle. And so when I gathered my senses, I picked the rifle up, I put another round in, and I took the bolt, but this time I just barely tapped it a few times, tink tink tink, and that bullet did not want to go. So I tried to pull the bullet out, and it was stuck in the barrel. And I was still pretty shook up. So I drove back into town, and I wasted a day of hunting, going to a gunsmith and getting the bullet out and just making sure everything was okay. Had to bite the bullet, no pun intended. Had to bite the bullet and buy another box of shells, and then I finished out my hunting season with that box. I took the other box back to my buddy and said, "Hey, man, I want my money back," and he gave me my money back, and he took his shells back. But I think that's the last time I've ever used hand-loaded rounds. I just have trust issues.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, kind of back to number 4. Be sure of your target and what's behind it. That's a pretty big one. Some people get that tunnel vision. They see that big buck or the elk or bear, whatever you're after, and they don't think to be aware of what's behind it. And it seems that not a year goes by without hearing about someone, not necessarily just in Colorado, but somewhere across the country, how someone misidentified the shot, got the wrong species for what the tag that they had, or shot a rancher's cow or a horse, or God forbid, in some cases, the rancher himself or another hunter.
Which has
So
happened.
we
And
can't
yeah, I
stress
mean,
enough,
an
no.
animal behind some scrub oak, and
Mhm.
they think it's one animal and it's something different, so they shoot through the scrub oak without knowing 100% what that target actually is. So I actually have a couple of stories as well with 4. Be sure your target and know what's behind it. Twice in my lifetime, and I've been hunting since I was a kid. Uh, I've had bullets fly by, like I could hear the whiz of the bullet go by me. And the first one happened when I was pretty young. I don't remember exactly. It was late teens, early 20s, but I had a bullet go by my head. And it's been so long ago, I don't remember the details. I just vividly remember that. Well, not vividly, but I remember it very well because it just, the sound stuck with me.
Sticks with you. Yeah.
Yeah. And then 3 or 4 years ago, it happened again. And this one I do remember vividly. I was hunkered down by this log, kind of overlooking this field, and it was a good spot where we know the animals like to cross. And a bullet flies by my head, and so I stood up right away. I had my blaze orange on, blaze orange hat, but I wanted to make myself big because I didn't know if a hunter was shooting in my direction because he thought I was a deer or an elk. And so I just wanted to make sure my orange was out there. And I'm like doing circles just to make sure this guy could see me. And actually I was so mad at the time, I wound up picking my stuff up and walking away because I didn't want to be near this. This is a family channel, so I'll keep it clean. But I was furious. And so there's those two situations. Know your target, know what's behind it. Second story. And this kind of goes back to what Doug was talking about. Buddy of mine and I were out hunting one year, and it was getting close to the end of the day, and this buck of a lifetime walks in front of me. He was probably a couple hundred yards out, and he goes walking by, and there was all kinds of tricky things, inclines and all kinds of things, distance I had to work with. And it would have been a buck of a lifetime to this day. It would have been the biggest one. So I take the shot and I miss, and he runs up over the ridge. And so I get back to camp and I'm talking to my buddy about this big buck I saw. And he goes, yeah, man, he said, I'm pretty sure I saw the same one. And through our conversation, we found out that we were in the same vicinity. And so I said, well, let's get back out there first thing in the morning, and maybe he's still hanging out there, and we'll have a shot at him. So we did. We get out there the next morning, and my buddy hears a shot. I didn't hear it for some reason. I don't know how far apart we were, but he's thinking the shot came from me. So he starts walking towards where he heard the shot, and he gets up to this hunter. And this is back in the flip phone days. We all had flip phones back then, and but we still, fortunately, we had pretty decent cell reception. And so my buddy walks up on this hunter, and he's on the phone. He's, hey, honey, I got my elk, and blah blah blah. And they have a conversation. He hangs up, and so my buddy walks up to him, and he says, "So, what makes you think that's an elk?" And the guy said, "Well, look how big he is. It's huge. It's got to be an elk." And he says to my friend, what makes you think it's not an elk? And my buddy says, I don't know, the color. And so the guy didn't even know, and he was an out-of-state hunter. He didn't know what he was shooting at. He thought he knew, but apparently he hadn't educated himself enough, to identify animals. He probably came from a state where it's nothing but whitetails, right? So
Yeah.
Those are just a few of the experiences I had, and the reason why we wanted to make this video, especially for new hunters, or if you are coming from out of state to Colorado or anywhere, if you're going to Canada and you're going for caribou, make sure you know what a caribou looks like. So that's why we're doing this video, guys.
Yeah. Now, so what you're seeing right now, this is a graphic taken right out of Colorado's big game regulations on page 11, or at least this year it's page 11. It might be something different in future years. But just be sure to review it. If you're new to hunting in Colorado or new to hunting in general, if just not familiar with the different species, make sure you know what you're going to be looking at, and the differences between them. The things that won't be included here are pictures of horses and cows, and there have been scenarios where those have been shot by hunters. And even a
Yeah.
rancher in a couple of cases got shot by a hunter out there. So, but if
Killed.
honestly, if you can't distinguish between a cow and or a horse and the big game animals, maybe you should reconsider hunting altogether. And in Colorado, there is what's called Samson's Law. It's basically a way of self-reporting if there's an issue. Like if you do accidentally shoot something, you're in a much better situation if you decide to if you go in and turn yourself in. Otherwise, the fines can be pretty steep. Um,
Tell
little
them first who Samson is.
Yeah, so Samson was a basically a gigantic elk that lived near Estes Park, Colorado. He was hung around there for years and completely tame. He would walk into town, people would feed him. I'll
Out
put
of
up a
their
link.
hands.
Yeah, he'd eat out of people's hands. And we'll put a link here to the story if you guys want to read up on it. It's just kind of a neat little story. Anyway,
Oh, sad.
yeah, it's sad actually. Somewhere along the line, some guy decided he was going to go ahead and he wanted to get his trophy elk, and the easiest way to get it was by getting, what had essentially become the town of Estes Park's pet elk.
Yeah.
So he went and shot it with a crossbow in the middle of town, if I recall correctly.
It was by a
Um,
YMCA.
yeah. So, but we'll put that link in for you guys to look at. Um, as far as the fines in Colorado, there's a $4,000 fine for poaching of a pronghorn antelope with a horn length of 14 inches or more. There's a $10,000 fine if you if you poach a bull moose or a mountain goat, bull elks with 6 or more points, mule deer with an antler spread of 22 inches or more, and white-tailed deer bucks with an antler spread of 18 inches or more. And that's not the highest. At 25,000 occurs if you poach a bighorn sheep with a horn length of one half curl or more. So it's something that we take very seriously here, and I would tell you that um, ethical hunters get more upset by poachers than probably anybody else. And if you get seen, people are going to turn you in. That's because if you're out there doing the wrong stuff, you make us all look bad. So
Yeah.
just don't do it, or if you're going to do it, don't come to Colorado. Go someplace else.
Yeah.
And in Colorado, hunting licenses do operate on 20-point violation systems, similar to your driver's license. And there's provisions in there with Samson's Law. We're not going to get into all the details of that, but ultimately you can have your hunting license suspended, and depending on the severity of the offense, it can be a lifetime ban.
Yeah, it's likely if you're deliberately going out like this guy that shot Samson, if you're deliberately going out to get a trophy animal, chances are you're going to lose your hunting privileges permanently. And as Doug mentioned, if you accidentally shoot something and turn yourself in, then you'll probably get some points taken away. So, anyways, well, if you guys like this video, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe. Leave some comments. Let us know what you think. If you're a seasoned hunter and you stuck with us this far, share this with your new hunting friends. They need to hear this. And make sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. You all have a good evening, and we'll see you next time.
Yep. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.